Hello, and welcome to the Godzilla Gallery, the show where we go back and look at things in my collection I think are interesting in interesting orders. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about a fan-favorite Godzilla design, and one of my personal favorites, and that is the 1968 Godzilla. Sometimes called the Shoshin-geki Goji by fans, but I'll just be referring to it as the 1968 Godzilla, or whichever variation of it specifically is. We'll get to those later. This design debuted in 1968's Destroy All Monsters, and stayed all the way until 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. If we're only counting major design changes, this is still the longest standing Godzilla suit of all time. The only design that even comes close is the 2019 Godzilla, which did get changed for Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. This also isn't counting the Heisei designs that changed in each film with only minor variations. So that's pretty much the briefest overview I can give to the design. Let's get to talking about the figures. Right in front of us here, we have the Bandai America Godzilla 1968 figure. Now, this figure has a lot of importance to me because, well, it's my very first Godzilla figure I ever remember having. And if you look, it's pretty obvious, considering just how beaten up it is. I remember this was a very common visitor to the sand pit in my backyard, and you can tell by all of the dirt alongside his body. And also some strange red marking alongside of one of his spines. But who cares, it's a classic figure if you lived in America in the 2000s, or are even a new Godzilla fan. His scale is shockingly bigger than a lot of his contemporaries in the Bandai America line. Putting him next to his most befitting figure from the Bandai America line, he really outscales Hedora by a lot. I mean, in the actual film, Hedora is much taller than Godzilla and is somewhere more around right here. But that's also considering that this Hedora figure is wildly inaccurate and is easily the worst of the Bandai America line. The articulation on this figure is very basic. It just has arms, legs, and the tail, and no head articulation, so to speak. The paint on him is fine, but I've always been very much bothered by how pink his mouth is compared to the rest of his body that's very dark in color. I don't know, it's always been very distracting to me whenever I look at this figure, but let's get to the next one. The next figure we're going to be talking about is its Japanese contemporary, the Bandai Movie Monster Series to Godzilla 1968. Now, if you watch my tags video, you'll know this figure had a hilarious inaccuracy in its tag in it having the 1973 Godzilla in its tag, but in the figure itself, it's the 1968 Godzilla. This figure is almost perfect at getting that likeness down. Putting them next to each other, you can tell the proportions on this one are a lot more accurate to the real suit compared to the very thin and slender waist of the American one. And with what I complained about in the American version with the very bright mouth, is definitely dialed back here and fits the color scheme a lot better, even though it's still a very bright color against a much darker figure overall. This guy has also seen his fair share of action too, as you can tell with the paint chips on the spine. He has the exact same articulation as the American one, with just legs, arms, and then the tail. I've always really appreciated this paint job on the spines. The sort of dark bluish gray color just looks great for this design. It's not totally accurate, but it gives the figure a very cool look to it. This figure really sums up the general idea of what Movie Monster Series was going for in the mid-2000s. Just a complete leap in detail and quality over the figures that were in the Godzilla collection back in the 90s, or even the Godzilla Island collection at the very end of the 90s. In all honesty, the Movie Monster Series really redefined what it meant to be a good Godzilla Bandai figure, and figures like this really proved that. But that's enough blabbering. Let's get to the next figure, which is... Wait a minute. So yeah, this is the Memorial Box 1968 Godzilla from the 50th Anniversary Memorial Box. And the first thing that jumps out at you is his very green coloration, especially in comparison to the Movie Monster Series version. If you know anything about the Memorial Box figures, you'll know that almost all the Godzillas suffer from this odd issue of being weirdly green, but this one definitely got it the worst. Comparing him to the 1962 Godzilla here, you can see that the green is a lot duller here and a lot less obviously noticeable as it is on 1968 here. And even a figure like the 1967 Godzilla, which has a much more dialed back green tone like most of the figures really do in the Memorial Box, it really makes you question why the 68 got this much green on him. Outside of the green coloration though, he also has the brown spines that are regular for the Memorial Box figures. It's pretty much just everything I said about the Movie Monster Series, but with a great big green slapped over the whole thing. It's fine. I think it's okay. I don't look at it much because I don't like how green he is, especially if I already have the Movie Monster Series, but he's a neat novelty and I can't get rid of him because I have the entire Memorial Box, and it would be weird to get rid of just one figure. And while we're talking about the Memorial Box figure, let's talk about the only tags I actually have in my possession for the 1968 Godzilla. So here's the card for Destroy All Monsters, where obviously Godzilla is hanging out with Minya. Here's the tag for All Monsters Attack, where Godzilla is very blurry while fighting Gabara. Here's the tag for Godzilla vs. Hedora, where Godzilla is flying in midair while eating his hands. And here's the tag for Godzilla vs. Gigan, which is one of the most normal looking ones out of the entire Memorial Box. Alright, next figure. Next figure I'm going to be talking about is my most recent figure acquisition as of this video, and that is the 1972 SH Monster Arts Godzilla. This is sort of where we're bending the rules on it just being 1968 Godzilla because, I mean, this is the 1972 version of it. But it's the same basic suit structure, save for the head and some very small details, so we're going to be counting it in here. Also because this figure's quality is honestly the reason I wanted to make this whole video in the first place. This figure is just incredible. If you know anything about SH Monster Arts, you know they've gained a reputation in the past couple of years for losing a lot of their quality, especially with other lines like Haya Toys coming to popularity. But I can safely say this 1972 Godzilla blows Haya out of the water and anybody else who wants to try. This might just be the greatest SH Monster Arts Godzilla of all time. It's just so perfect. The movement on him is just incredible. You can really get him into almost any pose you'd like. Like, watch this. Oh shit, here he comes! He comes with an alternate headpiece of his head covered in blood after he's been bludgeoned again and again by Gigan in the movie. Many people have taken the alternate head and have cut off the teeth and glued the mouth closed to get a more closed mouth 1968 design, and I've thought about doing that myself but haven't found the time to do it. One thing to note if you're interested in getting this figure is this spine right here on the neck. This spine is in fact supposed to wiggle around so you can move the neck up and down without losing the flow of the spine, so don't worry about this being a loose joint or whatever. You can really tell Bandai put in the work to make him look exactly like the 1972 Godzilla specifically. So overall, 10 out of 10 figure, perfect. If you're interested in getting it at all, get it before they stop producing it because you will come to regret it. It is that good of a figure. Alright, now we're going to be moving on to more odd novelty figures that I own of the 1968, not just 6 inches. Godzilla fans from the old days of YouTube will recognize this thing very easily, and that is the Far East Monsters Godzilla, with his little all sign. This was a part of a line called Far East Monsters, made back in the late 2000s in America, and is a part of a diorama set for Destroy All Monsters. The only two that were ever produced were Godzilla and King Ghidorah. Others were planned, but the recession of 2008 stopped production and ended the line. Attendees of G-Fest will also recognize this thing very easily, because the creator of Far East Monsters would attend every single year and sell off what he had remaining of his collection until about 2018. This figure is especially cool due to its light-up gimmick, seen right here in this rock, that if you press it down, you get... Paired up with the Ghidorah diorama, it just looks incredible. I love this thing to death. The next two items we're going to be talking about are Godzilla vs. Hedora specific, so I guess we're switching gears to the 1971 Godzilla. First up is the Yuji Sakai diorama for the 1971 Godzilla. If you've never seen these before, this was a series done by sculptor Yuji Sakai for every single Godzilla film up to Final Wars, barring 98. They all followed this general style, with Godzilla from an iconic scene in the film on a little diorama with a logo. Seen here is the scene at the end of the film when Godzilla rips out Hedora's eyes, or eggs, or whatever you want to think they are. For how small this thing is, it really packs a lot of detail and accuracy to the actual film. It even has Godzilla's skeleton hand and his blown out eye from his battle with Hedora. And other details people don't usually notice, like his more blackened spines throughout the duration of Godzilla vs. Hedora. Godzilla vs. Hedora is my second favorite Godzilla film of all time, so I just had to have a little diorama on my desk to represent one of my favorite scenes from it. Honestly, if your favorite Godzilla film is from Final Wars backwards, I would really recommend tracking down the one for your favorite Godzilla film, because it's a really neat ornament to have. Hopefully one day I'll have all of these and I can do a video on all of them, but for now I only have this one and the one for Son of Godzilla. And for the next and final figure, it is the SD Godzilla vs. Hedora finger puppet. Very similarly to the Yuji Sakai diorama, this is a scene from Godzilla vs. Hedora that's very iconic, and that's when Godzilla flies. Some specific details of the 1971 Godzilla are kept here, but they're a little harder to notice because it is more chibi-fied compared to the Yuji Sakai diorama. If you look closely and believe a little bit, you can almost make out that this is more of a skeletal hand compared to the hand on the other side, but that could just be something with the mold. But his blown-out eye is definitely there. Hedora also looks really cute from this angle, but she's not the focus of this video. It's Godzilla, only Godzilla. And that's all I really have to say on 1968 Godzilla figures. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I certainly did enjoy talking about all of these today. I wondered about in the last video, and it really did seem to work, but make sure to like and subscribe the video, and maybe share it with somebody if you really did enjoy it that much. Alright, that's all I have to say. See ya.